Thank you for downloading from Digital Mindfulness. This is episode 25. Welcome to Digital Mindfulness, where we share insights, wisdom, and tools that you can use to enhance the quality of your digital and digitized lives. I'm Lawrence Ampofo, and my guest today is Dr. Jodi Forlizzi. Jodi is a professor at the Human-Computer Interaction Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. She's also the co-founder of the healthcare startup Prata.us. Her research focuses on understanding the limits of human attention and the ways computers impact social behavior. In this great talk, Jodi and I share with you how technology and data can help us to live better lives. Enjoy this talk with Jodi Forlizzi. So, Jodi Forlizzi, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. I know it's really early for you over there. So, I, for one, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So let's get right on with it. I'd really like to know just a little bit more about you and your journey to working with human and computer interaction. What led you to working on technology for enhancing the quality of people's lives?
Sure. First of all, I remember when I was a freshman in college and I lived in Philadelphia, that there was a lady who used to come and wait for the trolley there, and she was so stooped over from osteoporosis that she was really bent at a 90-degree angle. And she used to stand in the street and cry for help so that someone could flag the trolley down and she could get on it. So we developed a little friendship. I would look out for her, and she would tell me what she did or what she ate. But what struck me about that was this poor elderly woman on her own that, was out navigating public transportation and really unable to do it alone. So fast forward to my time at Carnegie Mellon, I joined the faculty with a joint appointment in design and human-computer interaction. And one of the first projects I had the opportunity to encounter was this robot that was being developed by the technologist named Pearl, the nurse bot. And this robot, they had a strong desire that it would help elders. But since they were technologists, they didn't really understand how people would really interact with this robot. That part was kind of smoke and mirrors. And right after that, the robot's head broke. It cracked. So as my design team, my students and I, had a real opportunity to do some design research while we fixed this head. So we did a study that we designed a modular head that we could vary the height and width and appearance of the eyes, and we studied how people responded to different kinds of robot heads. And then relative to this project on elders, we did a large ethnographic study of how elders decline, both cognitively and physically and socially. And from that data, we identified some 52 opportunities for how robotic technology could help. So that's really how I got involved as a academic.
That's fascinating. And I'm just really interested, how did people respond to the different robot heads once you varied, say, the distance between the eyes, etc.?
People interpreted a long head, a head that's taller than it is wide, as a robot that was older and smarter. And they interpreted the wide head, like a baby-shaped head, as being friendly and approachable. And even when we did something as subtle as changing the color of the robot's lips from gray to pink, people made all kinds of interpretations. Of course, they thought it was female. And we went on and did more studies that showed that when the robot spoke with its pink lips, people believed it knew more about things that women would know about, like dating advice, for example. So we began to map out this landscape that subtly changing one design feature in this kind of technology could really change people's interpretations of robots. And so that, along with the elder work, where we came up with 5 areas where robotic technology could help, and we actually ended up designing 2 prototypes that sort of showed how this would work, sort of began to do a turn. It created this domain of human-robot interaction, and people began to understand that we need to figure out what people are doing and use that knowledge in what we design.
See, this is really interesting because it leads on to my next question insofar as your whole work on big data and using that information to help people understand who they are through life logging and wellness in healthcare. How does this actually happen? More like I've got a Fitbit watch, and how does big data tell me more about who I am as a person?
Right. Well, this is a huge area of research, and I'll talk about it in 2 ways. The first is the data that we collect about ourselves. So you've had this Fitbit, I don't know how long. I've had one too. And there's a lot of research that shows that people get these things with different hopes or aspirations, and then many times they stop using them, usually after about 2 to 4 months, or at the very least, they stop looking at the data. And there's a number of reasons why people do this, but broadly, their experience, their data does not match their lived experience of it. So I think while we're seeing a whole rash of these things come out in the commercial sector, we need to do some more in terms of designing the presentation of this data in a way that is meaningful for people. Right. The second way I want to talk about the big data is to say that we are in an era where a lot of information is being mined about people. I mean, people don't even realize how much is known about them. I mean, basically, if you have a social security number in the US and a credit card, they can triangulate and find out a lot about you. But now add on top your health insurance records, your bank financial records, much of this conducted in an online setting. And then add to that we carry smartphones, which are essentially sensor suites. So there's another big movement in HCI to mine this data to look at correlational factors in people's behavior. And it becomes exciting in areas like healthcare, where we can look at healthcare records and possibly predict and figure out what someone will need in terms of their health care. There's also a lot of interesting projects like there's a project I just posted on my Facebook page, I forget from where, but they studied Twitter feeds of people who cursed their tweets, and they found that these people had higher incidences of heart disease or diseases caused by stress.
No way.
So there's many, many interesting ways to look at this data, and it's a very rich time in HCI.
That is unbelievable. The people who cursed on Twitter had a higher incidence of heart disease.
Yes, and they've also looked at people mentioning being sick to their stomachs, and then they look at were any restaurants cited for violation of safety code and in preparing food, and they've looked at mentions of people being drunk, and then they study if alcohol is being served to underage people. I think in the UK that's not much of an issue, but yeah. So there's many ways that people are kind of trawling through this data and trying to find out knowledge. It's really fascinating.
So I guess then with the data that we're talking about, this is what we're really looking for is we're looking for correlations.
Yes, I still think you need to study people to find the causal information, what's causing, but I think mining big data is a very interesting and useful research mechanism.
So I know that you're doing also lots of work with the interface through which people can get access to this information so that it's, I guess, relevant and accessible for them.
Yes.
Why is the interface so important?
Well, it is the mechanism by which people make sense of the information. So, for example, one of my research projects was a small pilot study to see if we could have older adults track their health with off-the-shelf devices like Fitbits and blood pressure monitors and digital scales, so that we might detect who is going to be readmitted to the hospital. But we started with about 10 well elders, and we had them use these devices and keep a journal. And it was really interesting. In one case, a person saw their blood pressure readings and decided to stop taking their medication. Oh. And in another case, a person saw their blood pressure readings and called their doctor because they were alarmed. And in both these cases, these were their normal readings. But looking at the data, and the two measures, systolic and diastolic, was alarming to them because they didn't understand. So this is a simple example of how, in this case, the actual values were not meaningful to people. So the work of developing the interface by which people view the data allows us to understand in what ways are the data going to be meaningful.
So which devices or which companies do you think are doing this well at the moment? Well,
I really like the Fitbit dashboard, and one of the reasons I like it is so seamless. It's very easy to access it either from a mobile or a desktop, and I like the tiles bringing the summaries of information that's meaningful to me, and I like being able to drill down and see more data. Yeah. We also did a study that explored how to set goals with these devices, and we built a system over the Fitbit that allowed people to reflect on their goals when they set their goals. So we could get a Fitbit and we could set a goal of 10,000 steps a day, or we could get a Fitbit and think for about 2 minutes, which is what we asked people to do in the study, what really are your fitness goals? And once they set more reflective goals, they were actually better about doing more steps. So there's a lot of ways that these systems can inform, persuade, entice, engage people. And this is one area of my research, looking specifically actually at what strategies can we use to keep people sustaining use of these kind of personal informatics systems.
Because one of the things that you focus on is technology for behavioral change, and specifically how technology can be used to implement long-term behavioral change. But can you tell us how this is possible and whether technology can be used actually to develop long-term positive habits or behaviors?
Well, if we knew the how,
you'd be exceedingly rich.
But I think broadly, what I would say is that people's experience of the data has to align with what the data say.
Okay.
And that doesn't necessarily mean the hard numbers. It can mean how we present it. So maybe for those blood pressure patients, we show them, look, you're well within the range. You're within the range of people your age. You're within the range of your normal health. You're healthier than ever since you had a heart attack. So I think there's a lot of ways to sort of look at it.
So the experience of the data, how you experience the data, is related to how you feel. So if you feel bad, but the data is saying you're actually well, the data won't mean anything to you.
Well, let's say you wore your Fitbit yesterday and you walked all around London and you had a great day and you had a snack, maybe you went for an ice cream and it was good and you felt positive, and then you go back to your Fitbit and you see, gee, you only took 8,000 steps and your calories were way more than your output. So that could be depressing and off-putting. And, I've had days where I've closely monitored my Fitbit and those kinds of things happen. It's bedtime and I still need a few thousand steps or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe there's another way to show, this was your actual data, but overall you're in a positive trend. Overall, you felt good about today, and the walking and the camaraderie, those are the kinds of things that you should focus on. Another mechanism is to look at social meaning. So who's there with you? Who's in your group? Who can you talk about? What people can you link to? And this has also been shown to be very useful in helping people to generate good data and to understand their data.
Okay. Is it possible, do you think, Jodi, to over monitor ourselves?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there is a danger of becoming very prescriptive with these things. And I don't know what else to say about that, but to point back to this notion that the interface through which we interact with the system, if it could possibly work in a way that prevents that overuse or that negative use, I think it would be really great.
Because I know a lot of the interfaces are kind of like gamified, which
Yes.
then kind of leads to it generating more data, being competitive. I would imagine, like kind of running more or taking more steps. But
Yes.
so work on technology supporting, yes, that's it. So human attention limits. I think this is fascinating, your work with this. So this work sounds absolutely fascinating because digital technologies in the main rely on the fragmentation of human attention to increase engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So how can technology then, in this case, support human attention limits?
Right. One of the other strategies we're exploring is presenting this information in an ambient way so that it isn't taking all of our attention, that we might just get a subtle abstraction of what's going on rather than attending deeply to our phones. However, I will say that this is a broader problem in society. I was recently traveling through Heathrow, actually, and I was astounded at the number of people bumbling around the airport looking at their phones, almost running into people. And let's contrast that to being in Tokyo, where they actually have little signs on the sidewalk that say, "Do not look at your phone while walking." That society values harmony so much that people adhere to this social norm, and I think it's fascinating.
I think it's unfortunate that you came to that realization of people bumbling around in the UK. But
Well, it was probably happening in Newark too. But maybe by the time I got there, I was too tired to notice.
but you're right. I mean, this is like a wider problem in terms of the deficit in human attention. But I was wondering how. I mean, you talked about how in Japan they have signs and they have signs up from reminding people not to look at their phones while they're walking. But how can we, for example, not look at our phone? How can we be like partially aware of what's going on with our phone without being consumed by it? Do you have any
Right. I
insights
think
on that?
if we looked at abstraction as a design principle and delivering information on the periphery, whether that's the periphery of our touch or vision, it would be a good way to start. And nobody's really gotten there yet.
Wow. Information on the periphery. So, what would be an example of that, just out of interest?
Well, I mean, one simple example is the vibration of your phone. But that is an A-B signal. There's something to attend to. But maybe if the phone knew more about what it was, this is a call from your lawn service telling you that, the treatment is coming today. That's not really something you need to look at or attend to. Whereas, your wife or husband is calling and they have an emergency. That's something you need to attend to right now. So I think actually Google Now is stepping towards this. I think it's a really nice... they do very well at mining the information about somebody's email from someone's email and sensing that it might be important or meaningful. So, for example, if your flight, sorry, these are all travel stories.
No worries.
If someone has your itinerary in Google Now and a flight was canceled or rescheduled, Google Now tells that person, hey, this might be meaningful to you. This flight was rescheduled or is going to be late. So that's a really nice way of assigning a priority or a status to the information. Now, if we can combine that with some good design features, we may actually reduce the full attention to the phone. But I don't know. We seem to be a society who are addicted to these things.
Are you worried at all, Jodi, with the amount of information that can be mined about us?
Yes, but it's a reality. I think the job now is to convey to the public what this is. So, for example, here's a really funny story. Yesterday on the Carnegie Mellon campus, a scam email went out to all the undergraduate students saying that they would be thrown off the our network, our main computing network, if they didn't click this button. And it was a huge scam. And it turned out that the computing center did this because research shows that the best way to become sensitized to this is to actually click on one of these incorrect links to get phished. And I'm friends with the person who runs the help desk, and she said they had hundreds of people calling and showing up at the desk afraid that they had done something bad. I mean, it was an incredibly bad bumble to try to teach people about phishing. Yeah. And these are students that are attending a top technology university. Right. Now, spread that out to the person who has average knowledge about technology, and you can see where we're at.
Why do people view digital things as less valuable than real-world objects? And I was wondering, does this extend to people as well? Because the work on virtual possessions, this is some of the actual in-depth research you've been doing, and I just thought that was amazing that people view digital objects as less valuable than real-world objects. And yeah, I was wondering if that analogy or that finding extends to people as well, whether we view real-world relationships as more valuable than virtual relationships.
I would say yes and yes so far that I can tell from the evidence in my own research. So our group has done, so I'm not the expert on social proxies or agents. I know a little bit about that literature, but our group has done research on these virtual possessions for about 5 years now. Mm-hmm. And we stumbled upon it because we were doing research on divorced families, and we saw that the children of these families who moved between their parents' houses used their social network as a place, their third place where they were always available to their friends, whether they were on this side of town or that side of town. So this embarked us on this research on what we call virtual possessions, which are broadly defined as things that were once physical but no longer are, like photos and music, money, and things that never had a digital form, like geotags and likes and metadata. And over the course of these years, we looked at how people in particular ages of their life rely more or less on this. So for young people, it's very much about exhibiting identity and figuring out who you are. For people who are transitioning to early adulthood and have their first jobs after college, it is the holding place for everything because they are in transitional homes, they're not decorating, so their sources of creative inspiration are right there in the virtual possessions. And now we're doing work to see whether the form of these things can make them more or less meaningful. So we did a study that we're about to send to a conference where we compared different versions of objects, like, let's take, for example, a cookbook. Mm-hmm. So you could have a cookbook. You could have a cookbook that's been passed around your family for years and written in by your grandmother and other people when they made the recipes, or you could have a digital cookbook with the same thing. So in that example, people really valued the physical cookbook the most because it's the actual artifact. It captures the real and lived experience. In other ways, though, digital things were seen to be more meaningful. For example, culling together information about a family's legacy that was oriented to place or time. So let's say, my family grew up in Sicily, and now I can cull data about the land there, the generations. That then becomes a meaningful repository of information. So that is an area of our study. So right now, I can't uniformly say that for X or Y, physical things are always better. And I think as people change, as society changes, the context changes around it. So, for example, in the 70s, nobody wanted generic drugs, but now people ask for them. So there's just a change around the technology that's getting developed. So again, this is an interesting area of research.
Um, Jodi, I think this is a really good place to leave everything now.
Okay.
Where can people find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, at my website, jodiforlizzi.com.
Okay, fantastic. And I'll put links to that in the show notes. And I guess all of your papers and publications and things are on there.
There's an assortment, but you can also link to my Google Scholar, which has just about everything.
Fantastic. Jodi Forlizzi, thank you so much for spending time
Very
with us
nice to meet
today.
you. I'm glad we got the opportunity. If you need anything else, let me know.
Thank you very much, Jodi. Understanding what data really tells us about ourselves and how technology can be used to support human attention was extremely useful. Thank you all so much for downloading this podcast. We're really looking forward to being with you next week.